guys, welcome back to my channel. If it's your first time here, welcome. I'm more than happy to have you. Before we get started, go ahead and hit that red subscribe button if you aren't already. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into how to make this super easy DIY custom brim dad hat. So first thing, you want to get your hat of choice as well as a seam ripper. Then go ahead and rip the seam from the sweatband. Then you're going to rip the seam from the front of the hat. Once you're done, it'll look something like this, except you'll have fabric on the brim that you need to rip off. So now I'm going to take a marker as well as my fabric of choice, and I'm just going to line exactly on the edge of the brim. You don't need to leave any seam allowance. So once you're done tracing or outlining your brim, you're going to want to go ahead and cut this out, leaving a little extra room on top. And you're going to take this to the sewing machine. Now, mind you, there are 2 layers of fabric here. You'll need one for the top of the brim and one for the bottom. So now all I'm going to do is take this to the sewing machine, and you always want to start and end with a back stitch, and I'm sewing directly onto the line that I drew. And this is just going to ensure that the fabric lays perfectly on the brim and there's no extra hanging off or anything like that. So once you're done sewing that, you can go ahead and cut your thread, and the next step is going to be to cut off all of the excess fabric around the edge of the seam that you sewed. I like to cut close to the seam, but it's up to you. I left like a centimeter of fabric on there. So now you can go ahead and flip your fabric right side out. If I didn't mention before, you definitely want to sew your fabric together with wrong sides facing you, so right sides together. So now I'm just bending my brim a little bit to make it flat and easier to put inside of the fabric. So you just want to play with it a little bit and get it how you want it, nice and taut around the brim, and then you're going to go ahead and stitch right around this part of the brim. So here's my back stitch. And then I'm just going to go ahead and continue to sew, not through the brim, but right next to the edge of it. And as you can see here, I'm also pulling my fabric nice and taut because I don't want any ripples or bulges in the brim. I want it to lay nice and flat. So I'm just going to continue sewing all the way around the exterior of the brim. Then when I get to the end, I'm going to back stitch as always. And then you can just snip your thread again. So the next step after this is to just go ahead and cut off more of that excess fabric on top. I like to leave probably about 1 inch of fabric because you do need some fabric because that's what you're going to sew to the hat. So just go ahead and cut off majority of this fabric, leaving about 1 inch so that you can sew it onto your hat. Now here I am going to show you guys, I like to pull the fabric nice and taut and try to get it as even as possible. You can see the seam is directly on the edge of the brim. If you don't get it like that, it's okay, but you don't want the seam to be on top of the hat. So either right on the edge or underneath. So now I'm just making 3 snips. Sometimes if you use curved or if you're dealing with curved fabric, it's hard to sew, so the snips just make it more flexible. So now I'm doing my brim lines. As you can see, I started with a back stitch, and then I'm just going to use the edge of my brim as guidance, and I'm lining that up with the side of the presser foot and just sewing all the way around. And I like to do 3 brim lines. It's really up to you how many you want. But for the remainder of the brim lines, I just use the previous stitch that I sewed as my guide, and I line up the side of my presser foot to the previous stitch. It takes a while to get used to brim lines, so if you don't get it down right away, don't worry. I do custom hats as a living, so if you don't get it right away, don't beat yourself up. Just keep practicing and you will get it. So now you have your hat, and what you're going to want to do is grab the sweatband and bring it up to the front of the hat and find the middle seam. And then you're going to take a push pin, and right where that middle seam is, you're going to put the pin through the sweatband, only the sweatband. This is just a mark so you know where the middle is. And then you want to put your brim in between. Make sure you put it the right way. And then I just use my eyes and just kind of guess where the middle of the brim is, and I put my pointer finger on top where I think the middle is, and then I line up my pointer finger middle to the push pin middle. Then once I think it's pretty even, I go ahead and pin those two layers together. And now I'm going to pin 2 more push pins on each side. And for the sweatband part, I don't line it up like directly on the side of the brim. I kind of put the sweatband over the brim just a little tiny bit, because sometimes when I sew it'll move down and it just doesn't look right. So instead of putting it right here, I like to put it over the edge of the brim a little bit. Hope that makes sense. So now I'm just going to go ahead and sew it down, and I only sew through the brim right here where I backstitch. The rest of the way around I sew only through the fabric, if that makes sense. So you're just going to go ahead and continue to sew the rest of the sweatband on. So right here I'm just sewing through fabric. Then when I get to the end where I backstitch, I just go over the edge of the brim a little bit. And I've just found that that makes it a little bit more stable and not so floppy. So you guys are going to use the same color thread to match your hat. So you won't be able to see if it's crooked, but that's how it looks. And now for the last step, you guys, all you're going to do is pull your hat forward. I don't know what I was thinking, but I did these steps backwards. Like I would normally do this pin first, then go to the other side and do the exact same pin on the other side. I don't know why I did the middle ones first. I guess it doesn't matter. You can just pin it down however you want. The only reason you pin it down is to make sure that the hat lays flat and so that there are no like folds and bulges when you sew it down. So once it's nice and pinned, you're on your last step. And all you have to do now is, of course, what are you going to do first? Backstitch. And then you just go ahead and sew around the remainder of the hat. And make sure you're careful, because on this part, I normally do end up sewing through the hat, the brim, and the sweatband. So it's like lots of layers of thick fabric. So you want to be careful because you don't want to break your sewing machine. So just go ahead and sew all the way around. End with a back stitch, and that is it. You are all done. So here is your super cute and quick and easy, this takes me like 20 minutes, custom brim dad hat. So if you make your own, feel free to tag me. I would love to see them. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.